Jane, did you ever find the nails you were looking for?
Okay, Russ, you're now live, and I've made Kim your co-host.
Thank you, Harry.
Okay. I think Russ cannot hear me right now, so you should convey him I'm just leaving the class. Okay.
Okay, sure thing. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
So I'm.
By the way, Russ, I'll be sending you a message on Slack. Those were just the attendance, just the list of the participants of this class.
I'm sorry. Were you saying something to me, Kim?
Yes. What I'm saying is I'll be sending you a message on Slack. Those were just the list of the participants on this class. So just through Slack.
Okay. I'm going to test my screen share with you for 1 second here.
Okay.
Do you see Google Maps there?
I do.
Very good. Okay. I don't know why.
Okay.
There was something odd about my view. Hello there, Regina. Hey, David. Good to see you.
So video. Oh, interesting.
Do I want that?
That's fine. Actually, if it shows it up there, that would be easiest.
Yeah, but I gotta turn my
Truly.
mic off. Stop.
What's up? What's up, everybody?
Good evening, Regina. How are things
Good evening,
in?
Ross. Good evening.
Oh, same guy. All right,
Mhm.
cool.
Good evening. We're just running late from the restaurant, so I had to start it off in the car.
That's okay, Bridget. Is it Bridget?
Yes, it's either Bridget for most Americans or Brigitte.
Well, I thought it was Brigitte. Now that I look at it a little more carefully, I'm thinking it's a Brigitte.
Yes, I'm German.
Well, okay. I know a lot of Germans. Brigitte.
Brigitte, yep. All right.
Well, it's great to see a lot of people joining us this evening. I'm going to go ahead, thanks, Kim, and hit the record button. And remind me, Kim or Sebastian, are we live with this tonight? Are we streaming?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I see a lot of familiar folks here. My friend David from Maryland.
Hello, everybody.
David, you would love this walk.
Well, you already described it, and it looks fabulous. And now I'm doing that virtual walk through. I'm doing a virtual walk through that program, the Conqueror. So I'm up to 50 miles already.
Good for you. And I recognize a lot of folks: Regina, Jan, and Cindy. And we have another class tonight at 7:30. We're doing Rick Steves festivals in Europe as we get ready for Rick Steves. And we may have some people who joined us tonight through a Facebook invitation. So we'll give it one more minute to see if everyone's on. 23 folks. Great. Nobody repeating from last Thursday.
Not me. This is Dee.
Hi, Dee.
My first one.
Okay, good. Anybody, this is your first Get Set Up class, maybe?
Yes.
Oh, Dee, it's your first class. Awesome. I'm glad you picked this for your first class.
Well, I love Italy. I'm really, really Italian.
You're really, really Italian. You've been there recently?
Yeah, I've been there and I track my family, and one's from Sicily, the other side's from Abruzzi.
Okay.
So, yeah, really Italian.
Well, we do have Kim here from Get Set Up Support. So if anybody's having problems with anything, you can ask Kim. Tonight during the class, you can pop your questions in the chat. I will also periodically stop to invite questions. And I am doing an ongoing travel series for Get Set Up. As I said, we have one this evening afterwards, a Rick Steves in Europe session. Rick Steves will be with us on Get Set Up live, actual in-person Rick Steves next Tuesday. So 1 week from today, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we have Rick Steves. Hi, Joanne. Joanne and Frank. I'm assuming Frank's with Joanne tonight and hi, the other Joanne. We got both Joannes. We got Joanne Thomas and Joanne Kohler. Kohler.
Mhm.
Well, this is a great turnout this evening. Anybody here who saw the announcement for this on the St. Francis page on Facebook, The Way of St. Francis? Okay, we had a bunch of folks last week that came from the announcements I put on the Way of St. Francis page. Great to have you all here. It is one of the most lovely days we've had here yet in Virginia. I imagine it's like that for David up in Maryland. It was in the mid 70s.
Yep.
Not a good day to spend inside if you could avoid it. How is it in Sturgis, Michigan, Regina?
It is very nice and extremely warm.
Well, that's good.
Weird. But I'm enjoying it.
Joanne, where in Pennsylvania are you from? Joanne Kohler.
Outside of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Okay. So you're a little bit north of us. All right. It's probably nice there today too.
Beautiful. We were at a garden center this afternoon. And it was lovely.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm imagining some more people will join us. We're up to 29 people, so it's great to have so many folks and lots of names and people I recognize. Glad to have you back again. I'm going to share my screen with you. And this is the Way of St. Francis. Everybody see something that says the Way of St. Francis via Di Francesco? All right, good. We're all on the same virtual page. This is in the Nera Valley, and that is the city of, I believe, Arone. Italy is one hilltop town after another. I'm your guide, Russ Eanes. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is in the lovely Shenandoah Valley of Western Virginia between the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Allegheny Mountains. I'm a writer, a walker, and a cyclist. I formerly was a book publisher, and I love to help authors put their ideas in between the covers of a book. I'm now working full time as a guide for Get Set Up, and I'm specializing in travel. So if you're wanting to join us for any of our travel series, you might see me. I love the energy that I get from working with all of you, and that's why I'm working with Get Set Up. As you know, we help you learn useful things so you can do wonderful stuff. And we learn from each other. Ideally, we can see you and your cameras are on. You can request a recording of this after the class. You email help@getsetup.io and you can get that recording. You can watch us again. If anyone's joining by live stream, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. And by the way, we're not paid to promote any specific products, but boy, I'm going to promote one thing tonight and I'm not being paid for it. It is a guidebook by my friend Sandy Brown. In 2018, I walked 500 miles on the Camino Frances in Spain, the most walked modern Christian pilgrimage route in the world. In the year that I walked it, 2018, nearly 400,000 people walked part of it and arrived in Santiago de Compostela. I walked 500 miles and it took me 5 weeks. My dear wife joined me for the last 8 or 10 days of my walk, and we had a great time together. She walked about 100 miles and she loved it. This is us on the western portal of the cathedral in Santiago. It was under renovation, so unfortunately there were a lot of scaffolding out that day. The Way of St. Francis, by contrast, is a 300 mile or 500 kilometer path from Florence to Rome. Most of the pilgrims walk towards Rome with Assisi as a destination midway. My wife and I decided to do it a little bit differently. We didn't think that we had we didn't believe we had all the time to walk that. It would have taken us over 3 weeks. So we decided to walk to Assisi from Rieti, which means we were going to walk south to north. And we decided we would kind of do it over several years. So we would go back in 2020 and maybe walk another couple weeks and go back in 2021 and walk a couple more weeks. Well, we all know that didn't happen. And we actually walked the section that we walked in the fall of 2019, late September into October, grape harvest time, olive harvest time. And that was the last time that I got on an airplane. I'm going to stop this for 1 second, and I'm going to show you a map of where we were, because I find this is really interesting. And if we zoom out, everybody knows the Boot of Italy. And the Way of St. Francis goes between Florence up here in the northern part and Rome in the south. Now, there is a route that goes all the way from Canterbury in England across Spain and Switzerland into Italy, and it's called the Via di Francigena, and it tends to go down through Tuscany, so it is more western. So it goes through Siena and Lucca. It doesn't go into Florence. The route that I walked is a more modern route. Now, I say modern route in that people have been walking to Rome on a pilgrimage for thousands of years, nearly since the 1st century. And also people have been walking to Assisi or going to Assisi on pilgrimage since St. Francis died in the 13th century. However, the route we're on was not a formal pilgrimage route itself, but is actually a connection of places that meant something to Francis of Assisi in his lifetime in the Umbrian Mountains. And if you know anything about the geography of Italy, you would know that the center of it is mountainous, and so it's kind of like a big spine. And so the Way of St. Francis literally does go through the mountains of Italy. And so most people start in Florence in the north, walk all the way down to Assisi, and then from Assisi on to Rome. And that's 300 miles from north to south. And that's how the guidebooks go. We decided to do it a little bit differently. We decided to start in the small city of Rieti and walk north to Assisi. And let's see, we've got someone here we maybe need to mute. So maybe my TA can help here with muting someone. Let's see. If I get a little assistance there doing some muting, that would help. Thank you. This is the actual route we took, and these are each of our stops. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see. Those of you that know anything about the area will know where we went. So we started in Rieti, which is a city. Actually, Rieti is considered the geographic center of Italy from north to south, east to west. And we walked up north through the mountains to the town of Poggio Bustoni, and from there to Piedaluca, and from there to a town of Macanone, and then over there to Spoleto, Spoleto to Trevi, Trevi to Spello, Spello to Assisi. And those are all typical stops on the Way of St. Francis. So we did 8 days of walking, and we took an extra day in Spoleto because Spoleto was a fabulous city and there's a lot to see, well known for its arts. So now to take you back on a little bit of a tour of what we did. And this, by the way, is the common markings on the Way of St. Francis. I should point out that if you know the route, the French way on this Camino de Santiago is marked with a scallop shell, and is blue and yellow arrows. And the Way of St. Francis, the way we were following, was marked with these hash marks, which are blue and yellow hash marks. But it is actually the collection of a whole bunch of routes. So you have to kind of watch out for the signs. And to give you an idea, this is another set of signs. So the key is, you can see the key symbol up here on the top. That is the traditional symbol of pilgrimage to Rome. So the scallop shell is a symbol of pilgrimage to Santiago, and a palm branch is a symbol of pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And I'll show you here because I've got several of them. The Tau cross is a symbol of pilgrimage to Assisi. See if you can see what the Tau cross looks like, and you can see these everywhere in Assisi. Well, our plan was to go back. I said we walked this in September, October 2019. The plan was to go back in 2020 and complete at least part of the journey, go from Florence to Assisi. Well, that didn't happen. We all know why. And then maybe go back this year and walk from Rieti to Rome. Well, that didn't happen. So that's all going to happen sometime off in the future. Now, just to give you an idea of the route, and why I'm saying that there are several routes that we walked along. This shows all the various routes that you can take from Florence to Rome, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, actually 6 of them, and they're all marked. So when you're walking the route that we walked, you might see 1 of 4 or 5 or even 6 different route markings, because there are different guidebooks that give you different routes that you can go. And but they all mostly follow the same route from Florence to Rome, with a few little variances going through Spoleto and Rieti. We use Sandy Brown's book, his guidebook, published by Cicerone Press. I've got a copy here, and it's really the only most complete guidebook in English. And for Sandy is a friend. He has done this many times. He's also led tours, groups of pilgrims that have wanted to walk from Florence to Rome. He knows the whole area very well. The trick about what we were doing is that we were walking it backwards. So we had the guidebook, and the guidebook takes you from Florence to Rome, and there are all these, I think there's about 22 or 23 stages, and we were taking a lot of the same stages, but we were walking backwards and the other direction. And so the route, there's a lot of descriptions in there, like you come out of town and you come to the White House and turn right with a barking dog, and follow that dirt road down to a fence. Well, we were going the opposite direction. So each time we had to carefully study the route and hope we could find the markings, and then figure out everything in reverse. It worked out okay. We never really got lost. We may have gotten off route once or twice, and there were a couple of times where we had a hard time finding our way. There was a point where we came to a road that forked, and we didn't know which way the trail went. And she took one, and I took the other, and we walked about 100, 200 feet maybe up the path before one of us spotted the marker, and then we knew which way to go and yelled down to the other to come on around. But this is a really good guidebook for it. We flew to Rome, and if you don't know it, if you've never been to Rome, and this is my first time in Italy, you would know that the airport in Rome is, 35, 40 miles outside the city. And the fastest way to get there is a high-speed train. That still takes quite a bit of time. So we figured out how to get from the airport to the center of the city, where the train station was, where we were going to pick up our train to Rieti. And we took a bus in. It took about an hour and a quarter, something like that. And as you're entering Rome, suddenly you see these famous sites like the Colosseum. We're like, whoa, there's a Colosseum. I've been seeing pictures of that since I was a little kid. And there it is early in the morning and I'm sleepy. We caught a train early afternoon. By the way, we got into the central train station of Rome and we walked to the eastern train station. It was about 1.5 miles. And it was early morning and we threw our packs on and said, let's walk through Rome and see what Rome's like. So we had a great time walking through some old parts of Rome and then stopped and got a little coffee and a little sandwich and then took a train up to the town of Rieti. And if you look at this, I mean, this gives you an idea of what we're in for. Beautiful architecture with a fabulous roofing and towers, and you can see the mountains behind it. We knew we were going to be hiking in some mountains. We started off the next day we went into the central plaza where the cathedral was and kind of made that our starting point for the walk early in the morning. And we always like to photograph our feet at the beginning of our journey, our feet together. So this is the spot where we started in Rieti. And the first day that we were walking, we went through actually quite hilly country, nothing mountainous in terms of climbing, going over any mountains, but it was quite hilly. A lot of it was very remote and very beautiful. This is one of St. Francis's well-known spots that he loved out in the countryside near Rieti, and there are still Franciscan brothers living there to this day. We didn't stop in there; we just walked by it. But this is a kind of lovely countryside we walked through our first day. At points, it got very, we went through the woods and the trail got a bit rocky. One thing that Jane and I love to do when we're traveling is go into a bakery and a grocery store or something and buy some fixings to make our own lunch or even supper. So we stopped and found some great breads in a shop as we were heading out of town, and popped into the grocery store earlier and had bought some cheese and some other things to take along with us so we could stop and make our own lunch along the way. So that was a lot of fun. We were heading toward the town of Poggio Bustoni, which hangs along a hillside. This is not it. This is the town we went through to get to Poggio Bustoni. This is called Cantalice. And if you look at the very top of the town there, that building way up here at the top, which is where that's actually a church up there. That's where we entered the town. So we came in along the top of the hillside, top of the hill, and that's where the top of the town, and then had to walk all the way down to the bottom of the town. So it was quite spectacular. And that's what it looked like from quite a distance. And this is what one sees everywhere in the mountain and hill country of Italy. The towns seeming to cling impossibly to the mountain. The towns clinging to the mountainsides. I have no idea how they do it. And then we did a lot of steep walking for another couple miles from there. You can see our marker over here pointing toward our way to the Camino de Francesco. So we knew we were on the right road. And there's my wife pointing to Poggio Bustoni way up there in the hillside. We still got to walk all the way up there. And you can see as we entered the town, it was very nicely paved, but it was still quite steep and very narrow alleys and that we had to walk through to find our guest apartment. So we had a guest apartment that night. Poggio Bustoni is just a lovely town, and you can see the mountains behind it. We kind of skirt around the edge of the mountains, and again, how these towns cling to the mountainside without falling down sometimes seemed beyond me. Next morning, we woke up and looked back into the valley toward Rieti, and it was completely covered in fog. Up above Poggio Bustoni, there's a famous hermitage that St. Francis frequented. And it was about 1 kilometer and it was straight up the mountainside. And so we decided that day, instead of walking on to Piedeluca, which was intended to be our destination about 22 kilometers away, we were pretty tired and we didn't quite see how we were going to get there or where we would be able to get provisions or food or water along the way. So because it was a pilgrimage and not necessarily a walk the whole way, we said, we think we're going to take a bus to Piedeluca. But since we have some extra time, let's go up to the Hermitage because it was quite a hike. So we climbed way up the mountainside to this Hermitage, which is just lovely, and was, back in the time of St. Francis, a cave. And of course, the chapel was built around it. And it was a very, very lonely, remote spot, very beautiful up on the mountainside. We took a bus part of the way to Piedeluca, I should say, and then we took about a 6 kilometer walk the rest of the way. Piedeluca is a very lovely lake surrounded by mountains. And we enjoyed walking around the town, and took off the next morning. Let's see. Actually, I should point this: that we stayed at a hotel that night, a very nice hotel with a swimming pool. It was late September. It was too cold to swim, but it was a lovely thing, lovely place. And then we took off the next morning, walking back the direction that we had come through the previous afternoon, heading toward Arone. Along the way, we met lots of pilgrims going the other direction. Since we were walking south to north, kind of going the opposite direction of people making a pilgrimage to Rome, we ran into lots of pilgrims, not tons, not like you would on the Camino de Santiago, but this was a woman we met from America. I think she was from Texas. And my wife always enjoyed stopping and having a chat with pilgrims that we meet along the way. And then we went that day through a valley along the river Nera and kind of passed one one hillside town after another. This is Arone, which many people would stay in after the first day. We decided to go a little bit farther. Actually, we walked 25 kilometers this day, but most of it was on this kind of nice, gentle gravel dirt path over here. So it was very easy walking. And along that way, again, there's just one hillside town after another. Sometimes those hillside towns are just sitting up on the top of cliffs. And then in the middle of the afternoon, we met these two women. Now, this was one of the more interesting meetups that we had along the way. These two women were German. The younger of the two is on the left, and the older is in the middle. And of course, that's my wife, Jane, on the right. And we stopped and chat. They were on their way to Rome, and I asked them how much they were carrying, and they said they were carrying about 11 or 12 kilos. And if you know your weights, that's about 24 pounds, 25 pounds. The woman on the left, the younger one, was 76, and the older one was 80. So I always show this picture when people think that there's something they can't do at an older age, and they tell me that they go on these treks and hikes all the time. So if you're thinking maybe you're too old to go on a walk, think again. Again, that road that afternoon, this was just cutting along the paths, the banks of the river, the beautiful, lovely path. We were going because it was late September into October. The vineyards were all full, and they were about ready to harvest grapes. So that was fabulous. Much of central Italy is also covered in olive groves, and these are olive trees. That's what the unripe, not quite ready to pick olives look like. I managed to get up close to some. They're kind of disguised in the trees. You don't even quite know they're there. Again, they're castles up on the hilltops, and it's pretty dry in this valley that we were going through. This was something I enjoy. These are the tomatoes staked up in these kind of teepees. I thought that was fun. We stayed overnight in a hotel in the town of Macedonia. And the next day we had to cross a mountain range to get to Spoleto. That was a challenge. We weren't going to climb the tops of these mountains. Obviously, we were going to find the pass through the mountains, but it was quite a way. It was over 20 kilometers, and it was very remote. And you can see it was also pretty rocky. And because we were going the opposite direction, we kind of had a hard time following the directions. It took us a lot longer than we thought it would. And we didn't bring anywhere near enough water. And there were no places along the way for about 10, maybe 15 kilometers to stop and get any water if we wanted to. So we realized we weren't even quite halfway there. We were down to less than a liter of water between us. At that point, you can see how steep the path is there on the left. We happened to meet these two American women. The one on the right is the mother, and she's walking with her daughter there in the center. They were coming the other way. They'd started that morning in Spoleto, and they were heading toward Arone, the direction we had come from. And they were carrying camelbacks, and they had a lot of water, and they didn't need much more water. So they said, "Would you like some water?" And we said, "We would love some water." And we each filled up a couple liters of water, which then enabled us to get the rest of the way. And this is one of the wonderful things about pilgrimages like this, the people you meet and the opportunities that just happen along the way. And we were thinking, I guess we'll get along with just a little bit of water. I kind of take a couple sips. It was a pretty hot day, and we were having to do lots of climbing. So we were really grateful for the water they gave us. But because it was a lot harder to walk than we thought, we got down towards Spoleto much later than we anticipated. And so we stopped in a place called Monteluco, which was a monastery. And it was starting to get dark, and we realized that we were still going to have to walk several kilometers beyond that down to Spoleto, and the viaduct which crossed over a valley into the center of the city was impassable. They weren't allowing people to walk on it anymore. So we thought we might be getting down there in darkness, and we're going to have to be walking along a windy road. So we stopped and we inquired if there was a bus there, and they said yes, there was a bus coming in about an hour. And we thought, okay, maybe we can wait. Meanwhile, an Italian family came up in a car, and someone told them that we were a couple of American pilgrims heading to Spoleto. And they said, well, we're driving back to Spoleto tonight. Hop in the car. So we got a ride down to Spoleto, a couple kilometers, which was really nice. And this is Spoleto, an absolutely beautiful city known for its art festivals and music festivals. And we had decided to take an extra day there. We got a little guest apartment that was beautiful, and we're really lucky that we had that place, and we really enjoyed spending an extra day in Spoleto. This is that ancient viaduct which we wanted to cross over the valley, which is closed. You can see there's kind of another monastery over here on the other side. We were farther up the mountain. So it's beautiful, but unfortunately right now I think there had been an earthquake, and they weren't sure if it was safe. Came out of our guest apartment the next morning, ran into this Italian family. They saw somewhere, I guess we had an insignia or something about the Camino de Santiago, and they said, oh, the Camino de Santiago, we want to walk with Santiago. And anyway, we stopped and got the picture of them and their two cute children and their dog. I found the Italian people to be very friendly, very wonderful, and we really enjoyed them. That evening, we met a couple of Americans who were coming the other way, and I had gotten to know these two women on Facebook. There's this same Via di Francesco Facebook group, The Way of St. Francis. We had posted that we were, our progress and that we were going there, and they said, well, we're coming the other direction. Let's see if we can meet. And we were in Spoleto that same night, so we had a very nice meal with them. And this is, again, part of the camaraderie of pilgrimage that I just love. Each day I enjoyed stopping, if we could, mid-morning somewhere for a small cappuccino and a pastry with chocolate on it. One of the wonderful things about walking long distances is you can eat all you want, not worry about it. The next day after leaving Spoleto, we went to the hilltop town of Trevi. And Trevi is a beautiful old town. Here's the central plaza at the top, and we got there on a Sunday evening. And that evening, there was just everybody out in the cafes. It was Sunday. In fact, it seemed like the whole town was up there on Hilltop and playing in playgrounds and sitting in the cafes. It actually turned out to be one of my favorite towns that we stayed in along the whole way. The next day, we walked toward the town of Spello. And as we headed towards Spello, we met a group of Italian pilgrims, all with dogs. I think there were a group of about 6 of them and 6 dogs, and the dogs were getting along very well with each other. We met them outside the town of Foligno. Along the way, you often see chapels everywhere on the routes in Italy, much like you see in the waves, the Camino de Santiago. This is a larger chapel or small church, but often you just see these little shrines along the side for people that are making a pilgrimage, perhaps to Assisi or to Rome. Then we approached Spello, and if anyone knows Spello, Spello is a very ancient town. The Romans built it, and of course the Romans probably built it on top of an older town. And this is an arch from the 1st century. And Spello is known for its flower festival. They have a festival every year where they make beautiful artistic designs with flower petals. We thought Spello was almost too beautiful. There were flowers everywhere hanging out, but it was a absolutely lovely town. And then this is looking back from the direction where we'd come. We love the Italian roof lines. Next day, we left Spello and walked kind of along the edges of the mountains toward Assisi. And around noon, arrived at the gates of Assisi, where someone kindly got a picture of the two of us together. And we, again, since that was our destination, we stopped and got a picture of our feet in our pilgrimage destination of Assisi. And if anyone wants to know, I trek in sandals and not hiking shoes. I do bring shoes along. There were a few places where it was a little bit rocky or too much loose dirt in the path, and I was glad to have some shoes because you sandals, you can get dirt underneath. But I am a convinced sandal trekker, as is my wife. Assisi is a lovely town. It is was a town in Roman times, and some of the prominent buildings in town are still standing. The Roman buildings. This is looking down to the Church of St. Clair over here on the right from the hilltop, and down in the valley. So there's a wide valley below it, and actually the train station where you pick up the train to and from Assisi is down in this valley. So it's about a 2-kilometer walk down to the train. This is the Basilica of St. Francis, which is all the way at the hillside in one end of town, and he is buried in the basilica. And the first night that we were there, we went to the Pilgrim Mass. It was all in Italian, so unfortunately I didn't understand any of it, but it was nice to be there with a few other pilgrims. There were some pilgrims coming from Florence toward Rome, and we met them in Assisi, some people also that I had gotten to know. So it was nice to have a meal with some of them. But the basilica is beautiful, and there are many famous paintings inside of it from the 14th century. Enjoyed a guest apartment that had a fabulous little deck out back. And I always love a picture of my early morning cappuccino out on the deck. Lots of fabulous eating in Italy. I think this is some lentil soup. Of course, lentil soup's famous everywhere in Europe with some bread. The other big Italian meals are, of course, pasta and pizza. And the Italians make pizza very different than the Americans make pizza. This is the Rocca Maggiore, or the big castle, which is sitting up on top of a rock above the city of Assisi. There's also a smaller castle at the other end. We walked up to it, but we decided not to tour inside the castle. It was enough for us to spend. We spent a couple extra days just in it, walking, touring Assisi, because there's a lot to see there. It's quite a sizable town. It's a bit touristy, but it's still a very beautiful and very walkable town, but very hilly, very steep. While we were there, we went down to San Damiano, and this is the church where Francis of Assisi received his calling to rebuild the church. And this is about 1 kilometer below the city, and we actually found this one of the nicest spots. Didn't feel commercialized or touristy, just a lovely spot to go in. And this church is pretty much very similar, well, I should say very similar to how it was in the time of St. Francis. And Francis and his brothers gave this to St. Clair and her sisters as a convent. So it was that until recent years. We had arrived in Assisi on the day of the feast of St. Francis. That was totally a coincidence. I didn't think about that when we were planning our trip, because we got our plane reservations 9 months before. So there was a big parade the night before and the day of his feast day. So we happened to be there to watch some of the parades going by. One of the things that's a little jarring, perhaps, is the portiuncula, which is a little portion. And this is a small church which was given to Francis and his brothers by the bishop as their kind of home base, and is actually where St. Francis died. And it's a very tiny chapel. And after he died and was canonized, an enormous basilica was built over the chapel. So this isn't the only place in the world you see it, but it is unusual to see the tiny chapel that probably represented the simplicity and the smallness and the humility of Francis enclosed inside an enormous basilica. This is about maybe 3 kilometers below town, and it's actually where the train stops below Assisi. After spending a couple days in Assisi, we headed back to Rome by train. And of course, you have to tour a little bit of Rome. So we had 2 extra days in Rome, and we did the tourist thing in a very crowded Rome in October, packed with tourists. It was kind of ironic to see pictures of Rome about 6 months after I'd been there. And these are the Spanish Steps, one of the great sights of Rome. Places like this were completely empty. We also had a chance to go through the Forum, the Roman Forum. We discovered that one Sunday a month, they open it up for free and you can go in, and we happened to be there on that Sunday. So we got to go walk through the entire Roman Forum for free. We also took our time when in Rome to go out and find some local markets. I always urge people when you are in a foreign city to find out the market days, find the places where the locals go as a market, not just the tourists. And this was a market that we kind of sniffed out and spent some time at there our last afternoon. That is all I'm going to show you at this point. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody, and I am going to ask what kind of questions anyone has. Before I do that, though, I'll show you a couple of things I got. We walked as pilgrims to Assisi, and so because of that, we had a pilgrim credential. This is very similar to the type of credential the pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago have, and we got stamps on every day where we were. And when we went to Assisi, we showed them our credential, and they had seen how far we walked, and so they gave us a certificate that's saying we had been pilgrims to Assisi. So we came away with this, and of course, our other souvenirs were the crosses of the Tau crosses of St. Francis. We got several of these to bring home to our grandchildren. So that's a little bit about the pilgrimage. I think as more and more people walk the Camino de Santiago, and they want to do something different, and maybe they're feeling that the Camino de Santiago is pretty crowded, the Way of St. Francis is becoming more and more popular. And there are, of course, many variations on the route you can take. So it's not exactly like the Camino de Santiago in terms of lodging. There aren't as many albergues or hostels, but there are a few. And of course, in Italy, then you had to call a day ahead to make reservations. You couldn't just show up most places. Right now, I'm not even sure you can go anywhere there. We don't know when Europe will quite reopen for pilgrims again. Let me just ask, either by checking the chat, or if anyone has a question, raise your hand. I'd be very glad if anyone has any question. I would love to answer it. Yes, Hiroko.
It appears that you carried all your belongings. Because of the nature of the trip, I guess you could not just leave it at the hotel or something. That's all what you carried, right? On your back. I like to travel very light, and I never check in anything. So this looks very wonderful. I guess, I presume you carried all what you brought over to Italy.
We did. And when I walked the Camino de Santiago, I had about a 16-pound pack, which is, approximately 10% of my body weight. And that's all they recommend you take. And I had to bring a little bit more in the Camino de Santiago because I had to bring like a sleeping bag and a towel. And when we were in Italy, we were staying in guest accommodations along the whole way. So there were beds to sleep in and towels. So we didn't need to bring any of that. And I learned, I've always been a light traveler when I go somewhere. And one of my top travel tips that I give people is, if you're traveling overseas, carry on and stow it in the carry-on compartment above your seat, because that way, when you get to your destination, you've got everything. I know too many people that have traveled overseas, checked a bag, and it didn't arrive. But from walking the Camino de Santiago, I discovered how little I really needed to travel. And so actually now, when we travel within the country, I'm now just take my backpack. I'm not saying I won't use a suitcase, but mostly I just take a backpack, carry very little stuff. And we carried everything on our backs. I brought along a laptop because I was working on the trip. And I think if I went again, I wouldn't take a laptop. I've now gotten an iPad mini that I was making blog posts. So I think I would take that along with me to take the minimal amount of weight. But there's something very freeing that you've pointed out, Hiroko, to not have a lot of stuff with you. Let's see. Brigitte, did you have a question? Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I had to find the unmute button there for a second. Between the two paths, which one is more strenuous, or which one would you say as a beginner to take first, of the two paths?
You mean like the Camino de Santiago or the,
right.
Yeah. Well, the Way of St. Francis is more vigorous, and we actually walked an easier section of it, which was part of it. We wanted to just test it out. The Camino de Santiago is actually not hard walking. And there are many, because there's so many accommodations, you can stop every few kilometers. Most people don't know this, but about half of it is across very level ground. I want to say the Meseta, which is a third of it, is the broad northern Spanish plain. That's completely flat. That's like walking across Kansas. And the Way of St. Francis is much more physical. There's a lot of going up and down, and a lot more rigorous. And I would say, however, it's quite doable for someone who it's the first time walking. If we had started in Florence and walked to Assisi, it's even harder. There's a lot more climbing over some mountain ranges. Nothing like you would imagine. Well, I mean, put it this way, it's not cold or anything like that. It's warm mountain ranges, but it can be very vigorous. So read about it. I recommend you get Sandy's book and look at it closely if you're thinking of doing it. He also has lots of suggestions of kind of alternatives you can take, or maybe take it in smaller pieces.
Yeah, and the time of the year should make a difference too, right? Because northern Spain can get very, very hot in the summertime. That's not a good time to walk. And then I'm sure there's certain times in Italy that you wouldn't want to be walking through those mountains.
That's right. It is both in Spain and Italy. They have distinct winter, so it is colder there in the winter. I would say the time we went was perfect because I wore shorts and sandals the entire time in late September into October, which is the way I prefer to walk. It keeps you cool. We were never too hot at night, and we were never particularly cold. I think I had a fleece along with me and a light windbreaker. So very optimal weather. The nice thing about the fall is you get to see the grapes and the olives everywhere and ready to harvest. Gloria.
Did you have the ability to send your luggage ahead if you wanted? Would a person have that ability the same as the Camino Way?
That I don't know. I don't think that exists. There are a few places where you can do that, a very few. Here's the thing about it. If there were a few before the pandemic, I'm not sure what's going to be there the next year after it. Eventually, the facilities will come back up, but that always has been a more difficult thing. Going between Florence and Assisi, if you go south, because it's so rigorous and going through the mountains, it's harder to get from one village to the next. And actually, some of the footpaths that the pilgrims take are the most direct route.
And how many miles did you do on this trip? How many kilometers? Or
I think we did about 160 kilometers total. So it was like 110 miles, I think.
Great.
Something like that. And the nice thing was, after we'd had such a hard first day, I took pity on my wife who had a hard day. It was really hard walking. And so the next day, by taking bus part of the way, we were perfectly fine with that. And our intention some days to go back and walk from Florence to Assisi. And then another time we'll go back and we'll walk a little bit more of the section that we missed and go all the way to Rome. Having walked all the way on the Camino de Santiago and made a 5-week pilgrimage, I really enjoyed that. I don't feel the need to do something quite that vigorous necessarily anytime soon. I will do something like that again, but don't need to do anything like that soon. More questions?
And you said there were not the facilities like the Camino Way as far as stopping and restrooms and all of that, not as many along the way?
Not as many. Not as many.
Okay.
I'll say
because I
that.
only did the Sarria to Santiago, and there were plenty of them there.
There are plenty of them there. It's not quite like that.
Yeah.
Yes, Joyce.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. This is my first time here, but when you was doing all that walking, what is this country famous for? Like you see it in any animals, any scary like bears or anything? You run into anything like that?
No, we didn't. There might be some somewhere up there in the mountains, but we didn't run into any. I think the worst thing we saw were some dogs and cats. And they were pretty tame. Actually, there were some dogs behind a fence barking. That was the scariest thing we saw.
Right. Okay.
We had a very cute episode when we left the town of Piediluca. A dog started following us, and he followed us all the way to the next town. We're talking like 6 or 7 kilometers away. And he would have just kept following us all day, and we didn't know what to do. He was a really cute dog, and we really enjoyed having him. We kept trying to think he'd go all the way back, and he wouldn't. And so finally we stopped, and we managed to talk to somebody who understood enough English. The dog had tags, and he had his phone number on it. And someone with a phone, an Italian, picked up the phone and called and found his owner, who laughed about the dog having followed us 5 or 6 kilometers and gone to the next town, because it wasn't the first time this dog had done that.
Okay.
So that fellow was very generous and held the dog while we walked on, and then he took it. He gave the dog to some other people who were going back to the town it came from.
Awesome.
He was cute. Yeah, honestly, if I'd been allowed, I would have brought him home, but I couldn't do that.
And you can't be bringing strays back to the States, Russ.
Pardon me?
And you can't be bringing strays back to the States, Russ.
Well, actually, my biggest problem would have been the 2 cats I have at home or had at home. Then they would not been very welcoming to a dog as much as I liked him. I have to admit, I really do take a lot of notice to the animals, the domestic animals that I see along the way, anything from farm animals to dogs and cats. I'm a real pet lover. And when I was in Colombia in 2018, we all had a similar experience with a dog that followed us for a long way, and I would have brought him home too, but I wasn't allowed to. I never did figure out who owned the dogs in Colombia.
You know, Russ, that was probably St. Francis come back disguised as a dog.
Well, it might have been. It might have been, and he really enjoyed walking with us.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Brigitte.
There's a question here in the top box from Linda Franks. She said, "At any time, did you feel unsafe?"
No, we never did. We never felt unsafe. Even in Rome, we didn't feel unsafe. And the same thing was true in the Camino de Santiago. I understand the question, especially for women. It is a good question. And of course, my wife was with me, and no, we never felt unsafe.
Now, you mentioned there's people doing the pilgrimage with their dogs. Have you ever seen anyone take their cat?
Good luck. No. I actually had a cat. He's no longer living. We just lost him a few weeks ago, who did go on walks with us. He wouldn't have gone that far. I would have loved to have taken him. He would have enjoyed it. And I saw a lot of his doppelgangers along the Camino, and I see his doppelganger everywhere, but it wasn't him.
Okay. Does Italy have a lot of other trails besides those main 5? Do they have connecting ones that go east and west? And
yes, Italy is covered with trails. And I've only recently become aware of all the various guidebooks there are for other walks from east to west, north, south, all over the place. One of the things about Italy that we all know, if you stop and think about it, is the history. I used to say you can't take a step in Italy without stepping on history, and including Roman roads that still exist. And there are many famous routes all over Italy, and Italy is becoming famous for walking, as other places are. That is one tradition in Europe that is very, very different than the US. The Europeans talk about going walking. And what they mean is they're going on a trek. They've got a pack or something, and they're off for a walk for weeks or months. And in America, the closest we have to it is maybe someone goes and walks the Appalachian Trail or the Great Divide or the Pacific Crest Trail. And in which case they have to carry a lot of stuff with them, food and camping gear and cooking gear and sleeping bags. So they might be carrying 30, 40 pounds. Whereas in Europe, you can do these treks and you can stay in guest houses and eat your food along the way. You really don't need to carry very much with you. So it's very, very different culture. And also the towns and villages are very close together. I love it. That's why I love to go trekking in Europe. And I've, trekked in a lot of places on the continent, but most of my trekking has actually been in the United Kingdom, in the UK, where, by the way, in Scotland, there is no such thing as trespassing. You can walk anywhere. Any more questions? Anything in the chat, Kim?
That's it, actually, just from Linda.
Now, I forgot to ask, is there anybody here who's walked part of this route that I mentioned today? Anybody walk that? Anybody who's walked the Camino de Santiago? I know that Gloria's walked the route from Sadia. Okay, Susan, all right, you've walked the Camino. Very good. and Dominic. Dominic, where are you from?
Jersey City, New Jersey.
Okay.
I actually read your book last week. I loved it. Really amazing. And I love the Camino. So I read whatever I can. And then I just found it so, kind of interesting that you were doing this tonight when I've been thinking about doing the Way of St. Francis.
Well, I'll
So
tell you, thank you very much. I appreciate that you enjoyed my book. I loved writing it as much as I enjoyed walking the Camino. It was a really life-changing experience. I actually have an intention to write a book about this route. No one has written a book quite like that. There are guidebooks about it. And that was part of my intention to go back 2 more times to walk it, was to be able to draw up a full book about it, because I think it's going to be the next big Camino, next big pilgrimage walk after the Camino de Santiago. Once people discover, how easy, not easy, how wonderful it is to walk it. I should say it's not easy. I think everyone who's walked both would say that this is more rugged in terms of harder to walk. And so it's a little bit more of a challenge, but yeah, that's my next book. I'm working on one right now about a bike ride. And whenever I get back to Italy a couple more times, I'll do the next book about walking with St. Francis in Italy. So
I have to say, I appreciate Joyce's question about the animals too, because I wanted to do the Camino since I was a kid. My Spanish teacher told the class about it, right? But I almost didn't do it because I'm afraid of dogs. And then I read Shirley MacLaine's book, and there's like this pack of dogs in there. So I was like, there's no way I'm doing it. But I'm glad I forced myself to, because, to get over those kind of fears is all part of it. But it's a real fear when you're out there in the woods on your own,
Yep. Yeah, well, I've never seen anything like that on the Camino or in Spain. Like I said, in Italy, the dogs were, and they were also very small dogs, barking at me from behind their fences and their gates, making a big racket, showing off. The cats just yawned as we passed by and stroked them on the head. David.
Dominic.
Russ, just a real quick.
Hang on 1 sec, David. Regina, what were you going to ask?
I was gonna to say to Dominic to get his can of pepper spray and hit the road.
Yeah, that's what I decided to do, and I'm glad I did.
Actually,
right. Stay armed.
Yeah. You know what a good deterrent is for dogs, believe it or not? Just squirt water at them from your water bottle.
Yeah, do that too.
I've learned to do that on my bike. Even though I don't like dogs that chase after me on my bike, a friend of mine, and I've thought of pepper spray. I also can hurt an animal. I don't like it when dogs bark at me, but a friend of me said, "Oh, just take your water bottle out and squirt them." And I tried that a couple of times. They do run away. So, David, you had a question.
Well, just an observation. Somebody had asked a question about other trails, and I remember my daughter a number of years ago took a trip with her friends, and they walked the trail along Cinque Terre, which is on the northwest of Florence. And I forget how long she walked it, but she walked all 5 villages. And we had an opportunity to go there several years ago, and not with the intent to walk because we're with a larger group, but she said it was just a phenomenal trail to walk. And I've seen a video about it as well. So that's a very fascinating place.
David, you're right. That's a great walk. And that's where I recently discovered, since I went over and have come back, a lot of the many guidebooks and routes there are. The same company that did this guidebook that Sandy wrote about has Cicerone, Cicerone. Cicerone has hundreds of guidebooks, and they have a whole lot for walks in Italy, but also all over Europe. So if you ever get a chance, if you want a guidebook for somewhere, Cicerone, this publishing company in the UK, has it. There's also an Italian company, Terra di Mezzo, which has guidebooks. A lot of them are in Italian, so that doesn't do you any good if you don't read Italian, unfortunately.
What time is it?
4 minutes to 7.
Any more questions? We got time for one more question before we go.
I'm just curious, Russ, about when you get to Rome, if you're going from Florence, what's the arrival like there?
Yeah, I think the entire last day you're walking through the suburbs and into the city. And you do end up in St. Peter's Square, and there are pilgrim lodgings in Rome. So if you are a pilgrim walking, there are places that will take you. so you can get very inexpensive lodging. You have to prove that you did that. I think you spend quite at least the last day walking through the suburbs and into the city. That whole section that I skipped by going to Rieti is probably the easiest section. It's there's a lot, you walk through a lot more towns kind of connected to each other. And we want to get in the countryside. The reason I picked the section I did was because in looking at guidebooks, I fell in love with the pictures of the hilltop Italian towns. I said, I want to go through those places. So we decided that we wanted to arrive in Assisi. So rather than walk from Assisi going to Rieti, we said, well, we'll make that our pilgrimage destination. And I've talked a little bit with Sandy about it. He kind of laughed when I talked about trying to follow his guidebook backwards. Also, the route is kind of marked for people going north to south. So sometimes the markings are on the north side of a rock or a tree. And if you're going the other direction, you have to kind of walk and keep turning around and looking behind you to see if you're seeing the markings of the route. Well, everybody, I thank you for being out here with us tonight. And in a half an hour, just 7:30, there's another class I'll be doing. This one's another Rick Steves promotion. For Rick will be with us a week from tonight. And if you have time, come and join us again at 7:30. We'll be doing festivals in Europe and talking about some of those festivals that we've all been to. I guess sort of that feast day that I experienced in Assisi was kind of a festival. So we'll talk about some things like that. I really enjoyed having you all here. I really want to encourage you to come out to get set up. We're doing regular travel series. I'll be doing a lot more presentations like this and some other topics, and I'll be bringing in some guests to share about their experience. Let's see, are they still on? Joanne Collar. I'm hoping to get Joanne and her husband to talk about a trip to Cuba, which I think would be fascinating. So
I sent you my email the day before yesterday. Please be in contact.
I will be in contact. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I look forward to hearing from all of you. And everybody have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
See
you
you
so
later.
much. Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Russ, for having me.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye-bye.